So I'm curious about why you're here. So out of this group, is there someone that is willing to share something about what you hope to learn or experience? If you have any questions as we begin, or what interests you in the topic of this workshop? Anybody have something they want to toss out there? Yes. Mindfulness. That's a word that you hear frequently, and I think there's a reason in the kind of contemporary culture we live in. Somebody down here? I want help with leadership, all right? Is there anybody else in this room that has trouble being present in the moment? I think we all do, and there's a lot of reasons why that is the case. So, well, good. I think we've got some, I think we have some things here today that will help you think about mindfulness in your own life, your own sense of embodiment, and your sense of how you might develop a practice in those. So to begin with, I thought we'd talk about the lay of the land here. What is mindfulness? My guess is that everybody has a sense of what mindfulness is. Here's some ideas. There are many definitions of it, but one thing that is common to those is this state of living in the moment. And we see that with children. Children are just right where they are and who they are, and sometimes that's annoying because their boundaries aren't set, but it's very clear that they are right there. And that's not so true as we get older and we start to keep track of many things in one moment. The polarity of mindfulness is mindlessness. And mindlessness is a state in which your attention or your thoughts or your feelings or your awareness just randomly wander. So there's the far end, I guess, if you're going to set up a duality. Mindfulness has a relationship to many practices that many of you may be familiar with. So it's similar to meditation, to contemplation, to prayer, martial arts, yoga, and other somatic practices, which when I refer to somatic practices, I might be thinking of something like Feldenkrais, which is a way of approaching change in the body, or the Alexander technique. The one that I'm certified in is the Bartenia Fundamentals. So there are different practices that allow us to increase our mindfulness and giving attention to our bodies. So it is also, and I thought this top bullet point was interesting based on Christine Durham's last quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. We're in the present moment, but we keep ourselves open to a variety of perspectives. We're not dogmatic about the one way. But there are many ways up the mountain. And that's a key concept with mindfulness. Awareness of breath is at the core of mindfulness. Everyone take a deep breath, as deep as you can, and then let it out. And do several of those. When do you think the last time was you paid attention to your breathing? When was yours? When I went to bed. That maybe is when we let go, and sometimes some of us pay attention to our breathing when we go to sleep to be able to let go and to let the chatter in the head quiet. Right? The other concept that's very core to mindfulness is this idea of a beginner's mind. Think of something that you do over and over and over and over again in your life. Does it get annoying? Do you find yourself resenting having to do something over and over and over and over again? I do. And yet, if we approach a task as if we were doing it for the very first time, it transforms the task and it transforms ourselves. And that's that concept of a beginner's mind. In dance, for example, a student of dance will do 100 million pliés in their life, right? That's just one of the fundamental things they do in different positions of their legs. And in order to make that experience new each time, you need the beginner's mind. Same thing with folding laundry. I love folding laundry. I can look that I've done something. It stays there, it's done. And I can use that as a mindfulness practice for me. I think I went forward one too many. Okay, so let me just claim my point of view here for a sec. As a certified Lombardian movement analyst and as a dancer, professor of dance, I am a movement wonk. I love it. It's everywhere. It's even there in stillness. And there's so much that's conveyed through the body. It's fascinating, and I'm never bored because I have myself and I have everybody else in the world to help me understand the communicative power of human movement. My experience with both dance and general populations tells me that I'm not alone in this interest about our bodies. And I think that this is a particularly interesting forum to explore it in. Because when we're thinking about mindfulness or we're thinking about embodiment, the focus is on going inward. And in a room this big and in a group this big, that's a tendency to pull us outward. And life in general tends to pull us outward to do in the world. So I think for the next 40 minutes or so, let's see if we can balance the sense of checking in with our inner landscape and giving attention out into the world. And we need to do both. And being able to balance those helps us recuperate and helps us as beings feel more peace and more of a sense of wholeness, which I think are both really desirable goals. All right. Moving on to a somatic practice. This is the one that maybe you haven't had as much experience with. I know we have another CMA, Certified Movement Analyst, here in the front row. There's someone else that's had the training that I have. That's great. You may have a physical training of some kind that has given you certain body knowledge. In somatics, the term somatic education was coined by a man named Thomas Hanna, who was not a dancer. He was actually a philosopher, and he was trained in divinity as well. And he had experience with the Feldenkrais technique, which is an approach to training and retraining and repatterning the body, that led him to believe that movement is laid down in patterns in our body, and there's ways to change those patterns. And so he came up with this word somatics. And it's based on the belief that our bodies have their own wisdom, that we have an innate wisdom in our body, and it is a particular way of knowing. When you work with somatic movement, it's performed consciously rather than unconsciously. Think of a movement task that you did today where you weren't really conscious of doing it, but you did it. Can somebody give me an example? A what? Oh, your heartbeat. Yeah, you don't have to do anything about that. Thank goodness. You don't have to do anything about breathing either. Thank goodness. Agnes.
Tying your shoelaces.
Tying your shoelaces. How many times have you done that? Right? What about checking a cell phone message? You probably didn't consciously say, oh, I'm reaching, extending my arm, I'm opening my hand, I'm grasping around it. No, it's just a task that you just do. But if you're doing something somatically, you do it very consciously. And then you have the intention of focusing on the internal experience of the movement rather than a product. Now, in dance, we're real product-oriented, right? We want it to look a certain way. No matter what technique you're performing, you have a certain way it is supposed to look. And to go towards the sensation of it is a very different kind of a focus. In order to be effective, it should initially be done slowly. Anybody done anything slowly today? What did you do slowly today?
Well, I went to the gym and, you go down, you have to count how many seconds you go down without.
Oh, so you were doing squats or you had weights on your shoulders. So she was at the gym and she was counting how long she went down and how long she went up. All right. Now, was that for the experience of going slow or for the experience of reaching your target of X number of seconds?
Well, I think it was more so, challenging myself.
Challenging yourself. All right. Okay, good. So it doesn't always have to be slow, but to begin with, and there's a reason, because you have to introduce something new to your nervous system. Because our nervous system patterns ourselves, our patterns for tasks that we need to do. And then in order to lay down a new pattern, you have to shift what the expectation is. Right? A somatic movement is performed consciously with this internal focus and attention, and it's exploratory in nature. You're curious about movement and about the body. So if we practice a movement as if it's the first time we've done it, we'll notice something new and we'll find something else out about it. That's that beginner's mind. Practicing somatic movement is really different than doing sit-ups or running a race or some goal of, say, maybe fitness, but it's about the quality and it's about your inner experience with it. So let's experiment with the idea. I'm going to ask you to stand up, but don't stand up yet. What I'd like you to do is, I'll ring the chime, and as soon as the chime rings, notice everything you need to do to get yourself from sitting on your sits bones to standing on your feet. All right? This standing and sitting, I'm sure, is something we've done mindlessly today, right? So, anytime after this rings. Okay, so while you're standing, just kind of register. What was it that I experienced? What did I feel and sense in my body as I went from sitting to standing? Bless you. And now you're going to do the same thing, sitting back down. So that was just a little somatic standing and sitting. Anybody have an awareness about what it takes to actually stand up or sit down? They're pretty complex actions in terms of the neuromuscular system. What does it take to go from sitting to standing?
The first thing I noticed was
An
an intention.
intention. Brilliant.
I feel my muscles preparing to do something.
Absolutely. And that intention, that preparation, is going to determine the course of the action. All right. So there was a reason, there was a purpose. She was organizing her body. What else did you experience? Yes?
You need to have strong quads.
You need to have strong quads, right? You do, because they're taking the load, right? You're going from sitting on the bottom of your pelvis to taking it onto your feet. So you do need to have those quads to do the weight bearing as you're standing and sitting. Anybody else notice? How many of you noticed you have to go forward and up? Yeah, you notice that? All right. Yes? I had to find my balance. Yeah, and as you do it slower, it probably requires more sense of attention to balance because you're not used to doing it that way. And so you're navigating some territory that you don't usually experience. That makes sense. All right, so that was just a somatic approach where you're attending to your moving. All right, last word, embodiment. What is it? Embodiment is the process of perceiving the world through the body. And it's a term that came through psychotherapy. And originally, I love this, originally the word was bodyfulness. And it was such an awkward word and such a mouthful that instead of bodyfulness, the way we say mindfulness, we'd say bodyfulness, it became embodiment. So that's originally where that word came from. And embodiment is to the physical structure what mindfulness is to the thought process. You're attending. It's that same attention that we were talking about. Our capacity to be aware is the fundamental vehicle that allows us to change. So awareness, which I think somebody alluded to when I said, what do you want to learn or experience in this session? Awareness is what ties mindfulness and embodiment and somatic practices together. It's difficult to change what we're not aware of. So, in your handout, you have this My Body story. And in it, there are a list of factors. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is one I used with my students in a somatics class. Things that may have influenced your own body history. Our history is written in our bodies, in our cells. And so look at this list, and you don't want to go through necessarily all of them. They may not apply to you. But just pick out a couple that you think are significant in your own lived body history. What is significant for you in your lived history? And then write a statement. I'm not going to require you to share these. Some people may want to share, but you don't have to. So really let this be for you. And you're saying, what is it in my body history that helps inform me of my embodiedness? Somatotypes are, there are body types that relate to tendencies that you have physically. So there's an endomorph, there's a mesomorph, and there's an ectomorph. And they have different kinds of muscle fibers, like the ectomorphs have faster twitch muscles, and ectos are the long, skinny bodies, and mesos are the more muscular bodies, and endos are the more soft, round bodies. And so that's what a somatotype is. And there's a way of determining, if you're an ectomeso or a mesoendo, or there are kinds of profiles that would help you understand that about your body. And if that's not something you know anything about, then just leave it alone. I can give you an example for me of my birth order. I'm a second child, and I'm also a child that has an older sister, just under me as a brother, and then a younger sister. And as a child, I remember probably maybe 4 or 5 years old, I knew my sister Linda was special because she was oldest. I knew my brother was special because he was the only boy. And I knew my younger sister was special because she was the baby. And even at that very young age, I was confused as to who I was in the family. So that was one thing for my body story. And then another thing was my mother always had us doing, we were doing cartwheels and somersaults and doing elephant rolls in the living room, and we were always moving. And that patterned me, I think, to be a mover. So those are just some things about my body story. All right, so as you think about what's written in your body, what has given you this sense of who you are in your body, there's always the opportunity to look at it from other directions. So if there's something that you would like to alter or shift or change or expand or contract about it, there's always the potential for change. That's the great thing, is we always have other choices. There are other options. Okay? And you might want to continue to consider this if you're interested in this idea of who am I as a mind, body, spirit. It's an interesting exercise. But just understanding some of the factors that influence how you live this sense of day to day in your body is something I think that can be really informative. So now let's go to, have I done that? Trying to move forward. Oh, there we go. All right, you have a little body map here. Now I tried to make this as gender neutral as possible. And I tried to make it just kind of a body, not an extreme body. It's a body there. So you've got a front and you've got a back. So I'm going to ask you before you work with this map, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a minute, which will take you out of the space, and hopefully it'll send you inside to sensing your body. And with our eyes closed, it helps kind of quiet all that visual imagery that comes in with our eyes open. So just sense what you're experiencing right here. So instead of a history, which you were kind of pulling forward with that last exercise, you're in the moment present here. What is it that you're sensing, feeling, aware of in your body? And then softly open your eyes into the room, and just on your map there, indicate what you're aware of and where you're aware of it. You can use language. You could make a statement that said, I feel really alive at my fingertips and my toes and my head, but I feel kind of sludgy right in the middle of me. Or you can just draw lines. You could put little crunchy lines if something feels tense, or you could feel somewhere you can represent with your drawing implement what it is you sense, feel, or are aware of in your body right now, in the moment. If we closed our eyes again, you'd probably find something different. How many of you, just by show of hands, know that you hold tension somewhere in your body? Yeah. Put your hand where you hold tension. A lot of upper backs, jaw, yeah. For me, it would be right back here in my SI joint. That's been very cranky for a year now. Okay. What can you do to help release that tension? Move it. Movement can help, okay? Gentle movement helps. What else? Massage, yeah. Chiropractor, you guys have it, all right. Have you thought about where that tension came from? What creates that tension for you? This is kind of part of the body history, yeah? You've thought about it, you say, Any of you sit at a computer screen for a number of hours a day? Some of you? What does the shape of the body do as you sit in front of a computer? I'm seeing you do it. You go in, right? You narrow, you go forward, and you go down. And that tends to produce issues in the upper back as well as in the neck, right? You've got this disconnection of the head and the spine. And so if you were going to say, what can I do to experience a difference in that pattern, what would you do? Instead of going here, what would be a recuperation? What would take you into a different configuration of the body? Just standing. Okay, just standing. Now, if I've been this way a lot, I could just stand and I'd still be here, right? To some degree, that's an exaggeration, but once this has started to close, you really need to do something to open, like a big stretch. Try that right where you are. Be careful of your neighbor. So see if you can really open up the pectoralis right here. A good thing to do is to hang in the doorway. If you do this one, that one can open it up. If you have tension, if you tend to have tension in your low back, if you get a hold of something and you can, oops, I'm going cuckoo here, and you just find the place where you need to lengthen it out, find a way to let it do something different so it can balance itself out. Okay? Let's do a little more moving here. I don't know why sometimes there we go. So we're going to do a little moving. I don't want to make you nervous. This is not a dance class. But The body has movement as one of its vehicles of expression. It also has movement as a vehicle of recuperation, letting us return to ourselves. And so we're just going to do some little things here by our chair. So I love this quote. The body gives form to the mind's story. Mindfulness and embodied movement allow us a first-person experience with our bodies. Instead of it being an object, we're a subject. And that's incredibly empowering for populations that feel disempowered. Okay? So I am the subject of my movement. I'm not the object of my movement. It brings us choice. If we've done one thing in the past, we can always have other options. Remember, that's about mindfulness. I've got options. I don't always do the same thing the same way. And we can choose options that are appropriate to whatever circumstance we might be in. And choosing options gives us adaptability and flexibility, which are necessary for this world that just keeps getting more and more complex. It's not going the other direction. So that helps us to be able to cope with complexity, which I think is pretty empowering. So we're going to work with this idea of how the body forms itself in space for a minute. Kinesphere, is that a new word? Kinesphere, it's a cool word. Kinesphere, my kinesphere. It's like your space bubble. That's the space that you occupy and you consider to be yours. Sometimes our kinesphere shrinks and sometimes it grows, depending on where we are and what we're doing. So in your seat right now, see if you can pull your kinesphere in, so that you are distinctly separate from whoever is in front of you, behind you, beside you. Okay? Pull your kinesphere in. It doesn't even necessarily have to be physical. It could be. But you can psychologically just pull it right into your core. And now experience sending it out so that your kinesphere fills the room. So even though you're in that spot, see if you can send that psychological sense of my space out into the room. And now bring it back so that it's just kind of a medium-sized kinesphere there. All right, that's your space bubble. When you get into an elevator and there's somebody in there already and you don't know them, what do you tend to do? We all do. We shrink our kinesphere and we probably avert our eyes, although the extrovert may say, oh boy, somebody's here in the elevator with me. But I think we tend to pull into our own little kinesphere, right? When we're in, like if you're in a crowd and you're trying to find someone that you're looking for in the crowd and you're not sure where they are, you're probably trying to expand it to see if you can get yourself out and about to find them. So it serves us in different ways to understand our kinesphere. See if you can share your kinesphere with the person next to you without moving. So just sense that while you're next to someone, instead of two little space bubbles, those space bubbles somehow merge. But you don't even have to have done any moving. Just sense the fact that you now are occupying a shared space. Interesting thought. Yeah. This kind of a concept is, and you can pull back into your own kinesphere, or unless you want to stay in your shared kinesphere. I think that's useful to this idea of community building and to peace building and to conflict resolution. Understanding when you are in your space and when you may be in someone else's space and aren't invited and wanted in someone else's space. Important to know that. All right, our structure, our bodies have a structure. We've got up-downness, we've got side-sideness, and we've got forward-backness. So sitting in your chair, see if you can really lengthen your spine up without creating a lot of unnecessary tension. See if you can imagine that you've got energy that's shooting, glowing, beautiful golden light out through the crown of your head. And then down through your sits bones, you've got the same thing. So you've got two ways. It's like you're going between heaven and earth with that sense of verticality. You look taller. You have a sense of being very present in your vertical. Now let it slump, which is what we usually do. Right? And so I've gone from this beautiful lengthening to a kind of condensing, and I've curved into a ball. Sometimes this is recuperative. Sometimes it's a place that we need to be. But just be aware, if you're thinking about your presence and how it's read, verticality has a message. And you might consider how that's used. Now consider your side-sidedness. So we've got, put your hands on your ribs or on your hips or wherever you can feel the side-sideness. Okay? So we've got this width to us, yeah? Okay? So we've got up-downness, we've got side-sideness, and then we have forward-backness. Okay. Which one do we have the most of? Up-downness, side-sideness, or forward-backness? We have more up-downness, yeah. And the side-sideness and the forward-backness are secondary kind of dimensions that we have in our body. Just being aware of our 3 dimensions in our body. We're not cookie cutters, we're not flat, right? We have 3 dimensions. So just let your arms, again, be aware of your neighbor's kinesphere. Just allow yourself to experience your sidedness, your forward-backness, and your up-downness. That's how our bodies are constructed. And so understanding that we have that capacity for movement in those different directions is important. We can also think about our body in terms of forms. And so when we think of a pin-like shape, everybody make a pin-like shape, so a real narrow shape. In fact, let's stand up. You've been on your sits bones for a while. Stand up and just see how now you really can feel up through the crown, down through the center of the body, down through the pelvis. You can feel it translating into the floor. So it's like your feet are making an impression like memory foam or like mud. So you're really grounded there on the floor. So you've got that beautiful verticality. That's your pin-like shape. Now let your pin-like shape spread out a little bit. Just take a wider base. Does that feel different when you've got width between your feet? How does that feel compared to this, to pin? Feels more stable for some of you. You've got a little bit more width there to give you some stability. All right, what about your ball-like shape? So let your back really curve and sit yourself back down into your chair and make yourself as round as you can. So you really have a sense of curving. We shape our body that way. Oh, somebody's even got their knees up. So they're in a little ball like this. That's great. All right. Now, this is the tricky one. Try a pyramid. A pyramid. So you've got multiple bases of support. So you want to be nice and wide and deep in your pyramid. Anybody feel stable? Yeah, I can see the stability right here. She's got her sits bones, she's got her feet, she's got her head's anchoring up here. Yeah, there's a real sense of stability in a pyramid. So being aware how your body shapes as it's communicating is a powerful tool for being able to send a clear message. All right, and then thinking about, as we're moving, we're always shaping our body in the space. We're rising up in the vertical and we're sinking down in the vertical. We can spread into the horizontal. We can cross, think about it, into the also horizontal, but I'm closing. I can be really interesting and I can advance, or I can think, oh, that's a fairly strange idea, and I retreat. And that is always part of our communication, and just being aware of how we move in those dimensions is part of our communication. The other night, I saw a play in which 2 actors did 20 characters of Macbeth, and they did it in an hour and 20 minutes, no costumes, set pieces very simple, and they did all of Macbeth. And they embodied every character differently using these concepts. It was just amazing. It's brilliant. This is part of our language. This is part of our way of communicating. And to be aware of that helps us be more intentional in what we're doing. So let's do a breath exercise that allows us to sense ourselves as beings rather than doings or goings. I'm not a human going and I'm not a human doing, I am a human being. And I have to tell myself that all the time because I tend to be a doer and a goer. Right? So, allow yourself to close your eyes. And if you need to shift a little bit so you have a comfortable position, do that. You can shift anywhere in this as we're doing this little exercise. You can shift as you need to accommodate your own comfort. So you want to feel your spine easily lengthened upwards and downwards. Just easy. Let your head balance fluidly at the top of your spine and let your tailbone at the very bottom of your spine anchor you with ease onto the chair. Feel your arms and hands relaxed. And then notice your breath. You don't need to control your breath. You just want to notice it. Just notice the in and the out. And the rhythm. The sense of filling and emptying. You might notice your diaphragm, which is that dome-like muscle that when it relaxes, it sinks down as you inhale. And then as it contracts, it helps push the air out of the lungs. Now see if you can be aware of a quiet moment at the end of an inhale or at the end of an exhale. There is a quiet moment in the cycle before it reverses. Just notice that quiet moment. So now turn your attention to the interior of your body and notice how the shape of the inside of your body changes. So when you inhale, that space gets longer, it gets wider, and it gets deeper. And as you exhale, that space becomes shorter, becomes narrower, becomes more hollow. That's that same dimensionality we were playing with as we were standing and stretching. That shape change happens inside of us all the time. And it can be something that helps us sense ourselves and our bodies if we start to feel out of body. And as you're breathing, you may have thoughts, feelings, sensations. And if you're practicing mindfulness, you just bring your attention back to your breath. And that's one of the core practices of mindfulness. Now just softly open your eyes and allow yourself to come back into the room. And just notice, do you feel any different after you paid attention to your breath? Just notice, what am I aware of now after I had that very brief? I think with mindfulness practice, they suggest you start with 10 minutes, which could seem like an eternity to me. But that's what they suggest you start with. And then those that are really masters at it, they say their life is mindfulness. That could be a place to start anyway. There are a couple of slides here that I'm going to move through. Oh, here's one thought on breath. Most of us breathe an average of 17,000 to 24,000 breaths a day. That's a lot. And if that is an opportunity for us to practice balance, it's already built into our beings. So something to think about. Some people suggest that anytime you hear a chime, a ping, some kind of a noise that you would hear in your environment, that is a signal that tells you to pay attention to your breath. So maybe a cell phone, there's a message that comes in. That's an opportunity to practice breath. I thought that's a brilliant way to incorporate it into our everyday life. And there's different breathing techniques. Some of you in here have practiced yoga. Have you? There's different breaths associated with yoga practice, with meditation. Deep abdominal breathing is a great one to do, where you belly breathe, where you're really trying to fill in deep. A lot of us tend to breathe only up in the upper part, and we get kind of short of breath when we're up here. And so trying to go down deep into the belly helps produce relaxation. So that might be something to think about. I've done breathing before where, first of all, I tried to take the breath into my upper, and then into my middle, and then into my lower, and then as I emptied, go from my belly to my ribs to my collarbones. It takes such concentration to do. And again, it's a practice. And so it's not that we have to get it right this moment and we have the technique of it. All right, so I want to show you this picture here. All right, have you ever met your psoas muscle? Who has met their psoas muscle? Look at this. If you ever have a massage therapist go after that psoas, it's the deepest muscle in the body, and it's the muscle that allows you to flex your legs. So lift in your chair, just decrease the space between your thigh and your belly. That's flexion, which we do walking all the time, we do standing, we do sitting. It allows us to extend and stabilize the spine. It has to do with side bending. It also has to do with hip hiking, which can create imbalances in the hips, and if you've had a massage therapist or a body worker work on you for that. It's also the site of a lot of emotional stuff. Stuff gets stored there. So a lot of people don't know that they have a psoas muscle. But looking at it in this way, it shows you how deep it is, connecting spine to pelvis, pelvis to legs, legs to spine. And it's a muscle worth exploring. There actually is a book called the Psoas book, where there's a whole series of exercises about how to release it, how to strengthen it. Because a tight muscle isn't necessarily a strong muscle. And sitting in the chair like this we do so much sitting, so it shortens it, and it goes into an involuntary contraction. So it's worth exploring in terms of your body connectivity and your sense of well-being. We already did that one. Okay, so in closing here, I want you to just return to your breath. You don't have to close your eyes, but just notice something that you're curious about, that someone has said tonight, something you've experienced tonight, something that you want to find out more about. Just notice what that is. Because that can be a curiosity that can guide you into where you need and want to go with your own sense of being mindful, purposeful, aware in your body, in your daily life. It is a life journey. It requires practice. In the same way that you have a yoga practice, you have a mindfulness practice. You practice piano. Anything you want to become better at, you practice. When you are present in your body, this state of embodiment, and in your mind, you have access to more peace, more joy, more sensation, more trust in you as a being, more clarity, more empathy, more compassion, more sense of self-confidence and self-acceptance, more productivity and more wholeness. And for me, those are important things to spend some time on. And as we go forward from here tonight, I just wish you joy in the journey of exploring what's important for you to understand in coming to a greater sense of integration in your life.